On a calm day in the Pacific, what was supposed to be a routine display of Allied cooperation turned into something far more profound. Two carriers, one American, one Japanese, met at sea under clear skies, their crews expecting a standard exercise. Instead, they witnessed history in motion, a moment that quietly but unmistakably reshaped the balance of naval power in the Indo-Pacific. This wasn't just about flight operations or joint drills, it was about trust, transformation, and a message directed at anyone watching from across contested waters, the arrival of the Kaga. From the east came the Japanese warship JS Kaga, sleek and modern, reborn from its past role as a helicopter destroyer into something much more ambitious. Outfitted for the first time with F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters, it was no longer just a vessel for rescue and anti-submarine duties. It was Japan's first fixed-wing aircraft carrier since World War II, the product of a fundamental shift in Tokyo's defense doctrine. To the west waited a U.S. Navy supercarrier, flanked by destroyers and alive with deck activity. As aircraft buzzed across the formation, the tension was palpable. For decades, Japan had deliberately avoided anything that resembled an offensive navy. Political constraints, constitutional pacifism, and historical baggage all stood in the way of carriers. But the regional environment changed. China's rapid naval expansion, North Korea's provocations, and rising uncertainty in the Taiwan Strait forced Tokyo to evolve. The result was the Kaga's transformation. Its decks were reinforced with heat-resistant materials for vertical landings, its bow reshaped for smoother operations, and its systems carefully integrated with U.S. protocols. The upgrade wasn't cosmetic, it was a strategic declaration, a flag that said it all. What followed caught even seasoned sailors off guard. As an American F-35B approached the Kaga for landing, something unexpected fluttered on the Japanese mast, a traditional signal flag. Not an official code, not a procedural warning, but an old-school naval salute, a gesture of respect. At first, Japanese deck crew members looked uncertain, then nods spread across the formation, subtle smiles traded between allies. In that moment, formality gave way to recognition. This wasn't just about drills, this was about unity, history on steel. When that U.S. fighter touched down on the Kaga, it wasn't merely executing a precision landing, it was cementing a new chapter in naval history. For the first time, an American fifth-generation stealth jet had landed on a Japanese carrier. This wasn't staged for cameras or staged for headlines. It was operational, a practical demonstration that Japan's new carrier was fully interoperable with America's most advanced aviation assets. In one maneuver, the Kaga leapt from a support role to the front line of Allied power projection. Why it matters. Skeptics might shrug. One landing, one exercise, what's the big deal? But this wasn't about showcasing hardware. It was about proving capability and cooperation. Side by side, the U.S. Carrier Strike Group and the Kaga operated as if they had trained together for years. Radar systems synced, deck crews coordinated, flight operations ran like clockwork. And here's the key. They didn't have to do this. There was no treaty mandating joint carrier operations, no crisis forcing integration. This was a choice, one meant to send an unmistakable message to allies and adversaries alike. And someone was certainly watching. From across the East China Sea, Chinese satellites would have snapped images as soon as both carriers appeared in formation. For Beijing, this wasn't two navies exercising independently. This was a single Allied carrier strike group, flying two flags but operating as one. Bridging cultures on deck. Interoperability isn't just about jets and radars, it's about people. On the Kaga, Japanese deck crews worked with clipped precision. Every movement rehearsed, every gesture sharp. On the American carrier, the approach was looser, efficient but more intuitive, with orders barked loudly across the deck. Different tempos, different styles. Yet somehow it meshed. Because in naval aviation, culture takes a backseat to execution. When you're guiding a $100 million stealth fighter onto a moving deck at 140 knots, only precision matters. The real test came with cross-deck landings. A Japanese pilot, guided by an American landing signal officer, touched down flawlessly on the U.S. carrier. Minutes later, a U.S. Marine pilot executed a perfect landing on the Kaga. Two nations, two systems, one unit. Small hiccups, big lessons. Of course, it wasn't all seamless. At one point, a miscue with aircraft chocks delayed a launch from the Kaga's forward elevator. An American officer had to clarify deck status twice before operations resumed. But what mattered wasn't the mistake, it was the response. Instead of halting everything, both sides adapted in real time, ironing out the issue without losing momentum. That kind of flexibility under pressure is the foundation of true interoperability, choreography in contested waters. This wasn't happening in a vacuum. The encounter unfolded in the Philippine Sea, a region buzzing with strategic tension. Only days earlier, China had paraded its own carrier group past Taiwan. And as US and Japanese carriers worked together, a French strike group maneuvered further south, synchronizing movements in quiet solidarity. It was deliberate choreography, a rehearsal for a scenario no one dares to name outright, a crisis in the Taiwan Strait. At one point, radar picked up a Chinese reconnaissance drone circling near international airspace. The Allied response was immediate. Two American F-18s, flanked by a Japanese F-35, moved to intercept. No engagement, no escalation, just a firm reminder, we see you. Muscle memory for the future. By nightfall, the carriers glowed under deck lights, jets roaring through afterburners into the dark. It wasn't chaos. It was ballet with teeth. An aerial dance designed to build the one thing you can't improvise in war, muscle memory. Because if the Pacific does ignite, there will be no time for rehearsals. Every second counts, and this exercise proved both navies can act as one. The bigger picture. The implications ripple far beyond two decks at sea. Japan's quiet shift from a defensive posture to an active regional role is reshaping alliances. By operating seamlessly with the US-Japan signals, it is ready not only to defend its own waters, but to project power across the Indo-Pacific. This changes the calculus for countries like Australia, the Philippines, and South Korea. If Japan and the US can run joint carriers, what's to stop a fully integrated Indo-Pacific strike network? Suddenly, deterrence isn't just about America's presence, it's about a coalition prepared to act together. For China, the nightmare scenario isn't one US carrier, it's two allied carriers. Dual decks, overlapping air cover, shared intelligence, stretching hundreds of miles of dominance. That's more than power, that's synergy. A doctrinal shift. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this encounter is what it represents. A doctrinal evolution. For decades, Japan's maritime forces operated under heavy restrictions, limited to self-defense. Now, with the Kaga reborn, Japan isn't just defending, it's deterring. And the US, rather than overshadowing its ally, is choosing to integrate. This isn't about Washington leading and Tokyo following. It's about both nations moving in formation as equals with shared responsibility. Calm seas, loud silence. The encounter closed with a striking visual. Two carriers, two nations, one formation. Not a leader and follower, but partners moving as though they'd done it 100 times before. It was a message to allies, we're ready. It was a warning to rivals, think twice. In a Pacific increasingly defined by contest and competition, the loudest signals aren't always fired from guns. Sometimes they're written in the silent choreography of ships and aircraft, in the seamless landing of jets, and in the sight of two carriers sailing together. Calm seas may look peaceful, but when they carry two fully integrated allied carriers, that silence roars louder than any battle cry. So that's the story of how two carriers, one American, one Japanese, rewrote the rules of naval power in the Pacific. And if this breakdown gave you new insight, don't forget to smash that like and hit subscribe. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and remember, calm seas don't always mean quiet waters.